want to welcome you to the Caritas Consciousness Project. My name is Gloria Coelho. If you're joining us for the first time, Caritas is a nonprofit organization dedicated to the evolution of consciousness, both individually and collectively. We promote this evolution by offering presentations, interviews, classes, study groups on subjects relating to consciousness and healing, which is a huge field, right? It includes a lot of things, which is lucky for us because we have a lot to choose from. So we've been doing this for the past almost 18 years now, though we didn't go virtual until 2019. And this is, I think, we've had a little over 60, I think maybe this is number 62, video presentations since we started videotaping or, being virtual online. And all of our video recordings are viewable through our website and YouTube channel. And so our program is made possible by the support of our members and donors. If you enjoyed tonight's presentation and would like to make a donation or become a member, go to our website, caritascenter.org. And now let me introduce tonight's guest speaker, and that is Maren Muter, who from an early age began showing signs of being a unique creature. One that was meandering about, perhaps enlightened, perhaps a conduit with access to insights from the past as well as the future. She spent hours in the woods and meadows by creeks and even watched closely at how the plume of smoke and ash banked against the horizon as Mount St. Helens erupted. She ran barefoot, climbed trees, and believed in the mystical forces of nature with an inspiring sense of awe and fascination. She went on to pen thousands of poems, prose, questions, and insights, only to bury these writings in glass jars everywhere she went for 13 years. After studying psychology and sociology while delving into quantum theories, Maren has worked for over 20 years as a researcher and practitioner in the realm of metaphysics, past lives, development of consciousness, and after-death communications. Also known in some circles as the chocolate lady, as she also works with cacao and shares chocolate with the world around her. 45 years after burying her first letters, a treasure hunt ensued in which hundreds of letters were recovered from their subterranean keep. Her writings were a source of spiritual convalescence, an access point to a child's sense of oneness most people lose with age. The journal entries read as poems, and the poems as feelings lost. The letters not only have opened a window back into the life of this little girl, but have allowed others to take a similar journey because they were compiled into a book. And the name of that book is the Book of Buried Letters. Maren also speaks with private groups, has been interviewed by Regina Meredith, IANS, and will be on Gaia.com this fall. And so I'd like you to say hi to Maren and welcome her. And thank you, Maren, for joining us this evening.
Well, thank you for having me. And it's nice to meet everyone. And it's nice to see everyone. So meeting you and seeing you, which is great. How I typically go about presentations is I will talk for a little bit, and then I like to incorporate you guys into my presentation. So if you have questions, while I'm speaking, you're welcome to use the chat function or to raise your hand. Raising your hand is really easy on the bottom of your screen. Oh, let's see. There's a little reactions button and you can sit there and it says raise hand. But this way, it kind of tailors the conversation to what you are interested in hearing and maybe what you're experiencing now. Because as Gloria had mentioned, consciousness is a giant subject and there's many different ways and avenues that we can go about speaking of consciousness. As I begin this evening, I'm going to talk about how consciousness actually works, where it's located, and how we access it, how it's developed and formed for the human vessel that we are in now today. So we're going to start with our human vessel. Our human vessel is an organic entity, meaning it is designed and created to decompose. It is designed and created not to sustain hundreds and hundreds of years. It's actually supposed to be only temporary. Now, as we are developing, we have a brain, and our brain is actually what is creating the veil between here and the other side, the part that we can't see. When people say, oh, I want to reach to the other side of the veil, the only thing that's actually creating this veil is your brain. This is done so you can focus on this life here, so you can focus on what is needed to observe and survive this life as long as our human vessel is moving, ticking around. So when we are created, in Maren Muter, there really isn't too much of a veil. It's a free flow of information. We have an overarching consciousness that extends eternity and holds eternal information. As we develop and our brain starts developing in this body, it is developing to start observing. Now, subconsciously, we do have the fight or flight responses. We have the biological responses, the physiological responses that help keep the body safe while we are here from outside influences. And I look around, just so you know, I look all over the place because it depends on what I'm talking about, and that will be where it is. So I don't want you to think I'm not paying attention to you, because I am. I'm just looking at what I see. So when we are born, our brain immediately starts to really hyper fine tune the messages coming in. So it's already starting to do that a little bit in utero. It's starting to figure out, what is the environment going to be like? What am I getting born into? Is there plenty of food? Is the body that's growing me, is it under stress? Is it, a whole bunch of environmental aspects are being observed in utero. But once we're born, our brain starts hyper fine tuning. And what that means is we have eternal information. Now, our consciousness and the information coming from the other side of the veil is all waves. So if we imagine our brain being like a radio. So we'll just pretend our brain is a radio today. And we have all these knobs, and we can tune into different radio stations that are relevant to us. So we might be tuning into something that's making us feel good, whatever it is. Now, just for a brief moment, I want you to imagine you're driving in the car and you're headed down the highway, and every single radio station on the face of the planet, every single one, is coming through your speaker, all of it. And you need to, out of hearing all of these radio stations simultaneously from all over the world, you need to pick out what's relevant for you. Well, in order to do that, it would be practically impossible. It would cause your body to pretty much, or your radio to short circuit. You would be confused, and you would end up with just chaos. So you wouldn't get any of the information you needed. Your brain's job, and this is how the veil is created, your brain's job is to tune out all of the frequencies that are not relevant to your survival, that are not relevant to your need, to your life at that point. So it's constantly fine tuning. And as you learn things, so let's say that we learned 1 + 1 = 2, and we can apply that, we can understand that, then all of a sudden the brain starts tuning a little bit more. It starts opening up another frequency, or, just a little bit more. So we start getting more information in. So now we know that 1 + 1 = 2. And we know now 1 minus 1 equals 0. And we know 1 times 1 equals 1. And it just continues and it grows and grows and grows and correlates with what our needs are in regards to information. We can see that all of this information resides on the other side of the veil. We know that all of the things that we are going to learn are already known on the other side of the veil. And how do we get to see this? Well, at 2 years old, we have children that are born with understanding of complex mathematics that they shouldn't understand unless they graduated college. We have musicians like Beethoven writing incredible music at 3 and 4 years old, vast understanding. We have children that come in that can draw the most amazing portraits, the most amazing artwork, and the list goes on. The reason why they have this understanding is because it's just a fluke. It's when their brain is developing and maybe one of these frequencies that we're talking about is open. It's open a little bit more than everybody else's. And typically when this happens, when you look at savantism and stuff, typically the other kids and their peers will eventually catch up to the knowledge that they have. So they'll grow into that. Not all the time. I'm talking like if they have like huge mathematics, their peers, a small fraction of them might take that up and say, I really understand math, and take it all the way through the university level. And then they end up catching up, excuse me. But that's basically what's happening is we have these frequencies that for some reason kind of remained open. This is how we get past life memories. So we have children that act out past life connections, past life experiences. They understand them. They recognize that that's not who they are now, but they have snippets of these memories, just as we have a snippet of our memory from our birthday party at 5 years old or our 20th birthday party or whatever it is. We have snippets of memory in this life. And that works exactly the same way as a past life recollection would. Now, sometimes there's people that are born with other frequencies open. And when I have spoken to doctors and people who have spoken to me before, trying to figure out what's going on in my brain, for some reason, I have different frequencies that were left open during development. And it allows me to see or kind of live inside this veil. So I live kind of here, and I also live kind of on the other side. So I actually see the world also a little bit differently. I see a lot of fractals. I see our body sometimes, even when I'm looking at you, sometimes I see right through that, because we are made molecularly. We're not actually a solid. It's just that the vibration of these molecules is, humming at a different rate than a liquid would. So when we learned about this in school, the different stages of water, we have, frequencies that are nice and flowing. And so we have the water, and then all of a sudden, if we freeze it, we change the frequency of those molecules and turn it into ice cubes. And then if we boil it, we change the frequencies yet again, and we turn it into a gas. And that's exactly how our body is made, at a certain frequency. So sometimes when I look at people, I see through that frequency, or I actually just see the frequency itself. And that I kind of connect that way as well. So that's pretty interesting. And I was just going to say something and poof, it just went out my mind. I was going to say something neat. So I'll just keep talking and then we'll go from there. When we talk about mediumship, and I think this is one thing that a lot of people are curious about, because mediumship leads us into, connecting to the other side of the veil. And people think, well, I need to go to a medium, or I need to be able to speak to somebody else. in order to get messages from the other side of the veil. And what that does is it does two things. One, it allows us to open a conversation to the understanding that we are all connected exactly the same way as what we would consider a medium. So we live in a constant state of personal mediumship every single day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We are communicating through a form of mediumship. And how that works is through the development of the brain and these different frequencies, because we are constantly accessing the consciousness, the overarching consciousness, our eternal consciousness for information. So we're getting signals not only from the other side of the veil, but we're also getting signals environmentally. So we can get a signal when you and I are talking, and we can get a signal when we're talking with somebody that maybe we're not resonating with. And all of a sudden we start getting readings of those people. It's kind of like if you're walking down the street at night and there's a dark alleyway and we're thinking, okay, well, we should probably go down that alleyway. It's a shortcut. I'm going to go down, but all of a sudden you get this thing like, don't go down that alleyway. That's basically your consciousness taking in two things into account. One is taking frequencies that are being felt in that alleyway. So if there is a predator down there, or let's say that there's something down there that might be bad for you to run into, maybe there's broken stairs and you're getting a feel of the terrain, which you can feel when you're in the woods. You know, when all of a sudden you have a steep ledge or a steep drop off, your body can figure that out even in the dark if we're paying attention. And so you're getting this external stimulus coming in, and it's being felt and read all over your entire body. Your body is a conduit. It is an electromagnetic organism that is made to pick up frequency, and it's also made to send out frequency. So it's taking in this stimulus, and at the same time, your brain is processing the stimulus to find out, you know, what's going on and to evaluate the situation. And then your consciousness is also sending you signals like saying, yep, you really need to listen to this. Don't go down the alleyway, or, you know, don't run straight ahead in the woods because you're going to fall off the cliff. And so that is a really neat thing that we have access to every single day. There's different things that we can do to help increase this form of mediumship, this mediumship that we're working on, and that working off of, not necessarily working on, to open up more frequencies so we listen and have more direct information coming in from our consciousness, resonating within our soul, which is like our intuition. There's points in our life. Now, intuition, no matter who you are and no matter what medium you speak to or whatever is going on, no one has constant access to the other side of the veil 24 hours a day. I mean, like for messages from other people. You're working on it yourself for your own body. But sometimes we have different frequencies that are open. Sometimes our frequencies are a little more closed. And so it's not, what I'm saying is it's not going to stay wide open all the time. No one has that, because we work off of frequencies. So we're constantly going like this. We're constantly snaking around. The frequencies are a nice, healthy pattern. And sometimes we have, you know, way more access, and then sometimes it closes off so we can focus on what we need to do here. And then other times, for some reason, we have more frequencies open and we're getting more information than we would normally have at that time. And that's important that happens, because we do have things that we need to focus on here. So we might go through different stages. Maybe it's a longer period of time where, you know, we're raising children, or we're focusing on a career, or whatever it is, and we're focusing on this life. And so those frequencies, those extra frequencies might tune out, or we might just kind of ignore them if they're open. because we're doing what we're supposed to do, which is focus here. And then other times we have those frequencies that are open and we might still be pushing them out, or we might be recognizing them for what they are and listening to them. But I think the most important thing that we understand is there's nobody closer to the other side of the veil than you. No one. No one is closer than you are to the other side of the veil. And that means that the messages that are coming in from the other side of the veil are yours. And for the most part, 99.9% of the time, that little still voice that you're hearing is you. And so you're in very good hands because you're in your own hands. And your own consciousness doesn't want to see you trip and fall. And your own consciousness doesn't want to see you run out into the street. And because it wants you to stay here in this vessel for a little bit and observe. And I think and so you're in good hands. That's the good thing. Does anybody have any questions yet so far before I continue on to something else? Hi, James.
I have, can you hear me?
Oh,
We can hear you, Tanya.
okay, Tanya and then James.
Oh, sorry. I can't wait. I'm sorry.
No, you're
I
fine.
didn't raise, there's a car passing through. So, what about mothers and deceased kids? I feel my channel open. In the past, I didn't, but now I feel my daughter always. I mean, many times, not all the time, but certain times I have a question and then I get an answer from nowhere. You know, like I'm looking for something. Oh, I really misplaced it. Or her brother is doing something, he can't go ahead. And then I think, can you help us? You know, things like this. So
that's a very good question. And it is normal that when a parent or a mother loses a child, that some of the frequencies open up. And the reason is because we are still connected. We want to still be connected. Love never dies. Love is eternal. Love isn't derived from the inside of this body. It's not created inside of this body. Where our consciousness resides is in probably the most glorious form of compassion, which is far deeper than any love that we have. And when we lose a child, these frequencies in our brain kind of open up, because I know that sometimes when we lose a child, no matter how it happens, we want to go and find our child. Like spiritually, it's almost like, oh, I want to go. It's not like you want to die. It's just that you want to go find your child. You want to bring your child back. And that's a very natural part of this process. And your brain then opens up a little bit. So there's two things that are happening. One, because we have this overarching consciousness, and we have the consciousness, and we all have it up there, we could be tuning into conversations between your consciousness and your daughter's consciousness. You could be just opening up these frequencies, and so information is starting to come in a little bit more, and that it's a normal, healthy process that this happens after we lose a child. So that was a very good question. Thank you for asking that. And it's definitely the sign. I mean, it's a huge sign that consciousness continues after we depart this body, and we do see that a lot when we have people pass over, and especially children, where we are intimately connected with them, and we start getting messages in from the other side of the veil. So very good question. Thank you, Tanya. And James, you are next.
Thanks. Good to see you again. I had a question about animals. My understanding is that they're not quite as filtered as we are. Like they still have a pretty rich connection to the spirit world, I guess. What are your thoughts about that?
Thank you for asking that. I love this question. I love talking about the animal consciousness. Animals have consciousness just as much as we do. Animals have just as much access to the other side, and they also work in a form of spiritual mediumship every single day, even the lowly earthworm. One of the things that happens is our consciousness is determined, and how we present our consciousness is the vessel that we are in, this earthbound vessel that we're in. So trees have consciousness, everybody, and we have different environments that we're in. We have different needs that we are in, and we have different connections that we make. So when we talk about the earthworm, can the earthworm love? I would say yes, the earthworm can love, but it shows a different love than how we express our love. The earthworm loves the mud, the dirt, and the earthworm knows that it can't stay under the ground if it's raining and the earth becomes saturated, and so it comes up. The reason why we think that we are superior is because we aren't speaking the same language, the spiritual language that the rest of the earth is, that the rest of the earthbound vessels are actually. But the more that science is researching, the more they are finding communication styles and different things happening. Not necessarily, I mean, trees right now are the biggest thing, and everybody is talking about trees and the mycelium layer and the ways that trees recognize their own young. Trees know which saplings are actually theirs, and they will actually send special nutrients over to them, just as we would, take care of our child. The tree is taking care of their child. You look at whales, dolphins, even fish. Sorry, I keep choking on my air today. We're in the middle of a giant forest fire, and so there's a lot of smoke. But consciousness is presented, and our understanding of consciousness is presented differently in every single animal, plant, or mineral form. There's memory. They recognize who we are just as much as we recognize who they are. So we could have had a tree in our childhood, and we played by that tree all the time. And if we go into the yard, we'd recognize that tree because we played in that tree. That tree would actually be able to recognize us, just as a crow can recognize our face, just as we go outside and a chipmunk can figure out who we are in the midst of everything. So there could be 20 people out there, but that chipmunk knows that you're the one that's its friend. So they're thinking, living consciousness, and it's just a different presentation for forms of observation. I think one of the primary reasons we have these vessels here and in limited supply is because we're here in a form of observation. And this is actually quite beautiful, because when we learn to observe, when we learn to respond rather than react, we open up so much more to life, and we open up a compassion and open up these different frequencies that filter in more love, more understanding for our surroundings, more understanding for our connections and how we are intimately connected with absolutely everything on this earth. And it is a very special process. I mean, if we think about our connections to this earth, the tree literally breathes what we exhale, and we literally breathe what the tree exhales. And so we are intimately and molecularly connected to the tree, just as we are to everything else on this planet. And the more that we learn observation, and the more that we learn to respond rather than react when we're in situations, then all of a sudden we open up our consciousness. We open up our depth of compassion, and it's really something that's quite beautiful. Yes.
what is it about humans where we're so divorced from the source? Are we just too smart for our own good? Or?
Well, I would, going back through history and watching how we started moving through this life, we weren't always so disconnected, and we're not necessarily smarter than the human forms were 10,000 years ago. We, in some ways, are technologically smarter, and in some ways, we are far less intelligent. We started during certain parts of our evolutionary processes in life development, so like how we're living and where we're living in our homes, and the development of the light bulb, or factories and things like that, and the airplanes. All of a sudden, by doing that, it kind of removed us from our connection with the earth, because we didn't have to do so much. So when we were farming and planting, now we don't even have to touch the soil, where before we were hands and knees in the soil. We were pulling weeds, we were doing our own form of GMO historically by ourselves, by saying, okay, this crop turned out better, and then we do that. But we were still connected with the earth. We paid more attention to when we're planting and things like that. And so over time, we have divorced ourselves from nature on the whole. And by doing that, we unfortunately have created a much bigger divide and thickened up this veil, because now we don't need as much information from the other side of the veil, because things are done for us. And we see a lot of this playing out in the upcoming generations, where they are, for the most part, very, very, very disconnected, and focusing on themselves more and more and more, and saying, look at me, look at me, look at me, and creating more self-importance. So we see this magnified, where we were kind of getting the more self-importance over the last 100 years, 200 years. But now in the last, 10 years, very, very obviously. And that's because there's this disconnect from nature. That's because they have disconnected and are not listening, because we're doing everything. Mechanically, we're doing everything. We don't have to do anything besides wake up in the morning and go get a coffee or make a coffee, and we have completely removed ourselves. And this last year and a half, there's good things that came out of the COVID shutdown that I love, but then at the same time, there are things that we're starting to see, especially with this youngest generation of the kids that are going to school in masks. And whether good or bad, what's happening is we are teaching children to fear everything. We're teaching children to fear other children. We're teaching children to fear people. We're teaching children to fear going outside. And this is like, it's going to be very, very, very profound. And we won't actually see the ramifications of this for another 10 to 20 years from now, when we start realizing what we have done. If and removing these connections is a detriment to our civilization as a whole. So thank you, James. Those were very good questions. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions so far? No? All right, let's see. Now we've come down this road. Let's see what kind of topic we can pull up out of consciousness. Oh yes, Buffy.
Hello. You mentioned earlier that there were things that we could do to open the frequencies more, I think. Did you? Would you mind talking about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm glad that we started out where we did so that we know that we are already connected to the other side of the veil. Some of the things that we can do to increase the information or to open up these frequencies is, number one, the most important thing we can do is listen to our own intuition. So out of all the noise that is out there and all the people telling us what we should and shouldn't do, and we don't have to go through different mantras, we don't have to clear and sage rooms. All we need to do, the first and biggest thing, is to listen to our intuition and trust our intuition. The more that we listen, the more that we trust, then the more these frequencies will open up for us. Different forms of meditation can help us do this, to recognize these frequencies. They will, in meditation, we are going to be able to start recognizing the different signals that are coming in, because we're sitting with ourselves quietly. There aren't any, we don't need to worry about lining chakras and all of those things. Meditation is basically learning to sit with yourself. Meditation is basically learning to listen to your intuition. And so you can take journeys in your meditation. You can have transcendental meditations. And this is all by trusting your own intuition. This is all by learning to sit with yourself, learning to listen, learning to feel the different feels on your skin, learning to feel the different feels within your body, different sounds, different frequencies, different vibrations. Are you getting vibrations behind your eyelids if your eyelids are shut? And sometimes if we close our eyes, we get to see all the little pixelations and the different forms of light. And sometimes we get to see color. And if we go into that, if we allow ourselves to truly just focus in on those pixelations, then all of a sudden we are allowing ourselves to go deeper into these different frequencies. There's physical exercises that we can do that actually just kind of bring awareness to the electromagnetic frequency that our own body makes. So the connections and circuits that our own body creates, because we are electromagnetic beings. So, yep. And so we can press our hands together and have our hands stay together and press them really, really, really hard for 1.5 to 2 minutes. And then you just slowly, like, you drop your shoulders, you drop your elbows, and you just super slowly release your hands. And so you can see how slowly I'm doing it. And so you kind of stay closed, but you can bring your hands out, you can bring them in, you can bring them out. And then all of a sudden, between your hands, you're going to feel slight resistance. And what that resistance is actually your current, your electricity. And it's actually the other side of the veil, because you can't see it. You're creating this current. And then once we get familiar with how this current feels, if we want, we can move our hands, we can bring them over our head, we can bring them over our knee, over our back. And so and we start recognizing this frequency. And then after we learn to do that, then we can continue this, and we can start what is called an automatic recall, or an automatic call of that frequency. So let's say that you might have had a suspicion that there is an entity or spirit or a message coming in over here. You felt just a small brush on your skin, or however that happened. You can actually automatically recall this frequency that is your body to go out a little bit farther and connect with whatever entity that is out there. And then you can start getting reading that way of who it might have been. You might get flashes of situations. You might get a whole bunch of other readings. And so that would be, learning to call upon your energy that way. It's not, again, when we think spiritually, when we think energetically and the other side of the veil, it's not in English, it's not in Arabic, it's not in Greek, it's vibrational. So the reason why we speak English, or in whatever language we're speaking, is for communication purposes only, on the earthbound stage. So the only reason why we are talking is to communicate with each other. Now, our brain, after learning to speak, starts talking to us in a language as well. And it's our brain's job to translate information that's coming in from the outside to something that's recognizable. So it's not that we have, I like to use the Akashic records on this example really quickly. So we have people that have near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences or go into hypnosis or whatever, or you talk to somebody and you talk to a medium and they're saying, oh, we have these Akashic records. Looks like a library, or we have all these creatures. We can tell it, these are your animals that you used to have in your life and all this kind of stuff. Well, it's not, there's no book. There's no formal record. There's no computer. There's no library. There's none of that up there or out there. But the reason why we have spoken about it in that way is because our brain has demodulated information. Our brain has decoded information, these frequencies that are coming in, translated the frequencies into something recognizable for us in this human vessel. So our brain is always looking for patterns or forms of recognition. And so that's why we speak. But to get to the other side of the veil, we don't need to sit here and say, okay, my intention is this, and you're speaking all these words, because the more you actually speak, the more you're staying within that beneath the veil of your brain. So things outside the veil aren't speaking English really, but the things within the veil, within this encompassed human body, you're speaking. And so you're still staying within that parameter. You're still staying within that limitation. When we learn to let go of language and we learn to trust the frequency of our intuition, which isn't necessarily language, all of a sudden we are going to be having more access because we're not keeping ourselves within the bounds of our human vessel. And I think that's one of the biggest questions that people look for is, how do we leave the body? How do people that are doing transcendental meditation or having out-of-body experiences, how are they leaving this body spiritually and coming back? And number one, if people have used psychedelic medications, then what that's doing is just shutting your brain. It's opening things up and it's skewing your brain. What it's doing is it's taking the frequencies of your brain, the energy, the electrical currents in your brain, and kind of short circuiting them. That's going zzz, and then all of a sudden, as they're going zzz, and it's doing different parts of your brain, it gives you a portal. It gives you a way out. Transcendental meditation, or just even standard meditation, does the same thing. What it does is it's blocking different frequencies in your brain, kind of finding your way out. It's like saying, it's finding the hole, the drain in the swimming pool, or a leak in the bag. That's what you're creating when you're doing a meditation of sorts. But when you come back and your body and your brain reanimates, this is very common in near-death experiences. So you have people that have got their brain, everything has been declared clinically dead. And let's say they've been in a coma and their brain is clinically dead. When you listen to people, they're like, oh my gosh, I knew exactly what was going on. I could see everything. I could hear everything, completely aware of everything that was going on. While they were there in that state, they weren't speaking English. They weren't necessarily feeling like they are in a human body and their spirit left their body and it's still in this human form. They're experiencing it energetically. They're experiencing it spiritually. But when their brain reanimates, when their body reanimates, all of a sudden, simultaneously, what your brain is going to do is it's going to translate everything that happened into something recognizable or something that's not very recognizable, and then it creates a nightmare. But that happens simultaneously. So when we awaken, we think in our brain that this is what the scene looked like. This is where we were. This is what it is. When in reality, what your brain is doing is it's translating what happened and giving you imagery, giving you pictures so you can understand it and so you can communicate it with others. So now you still have this connection with another human being or a connection with other things. But you listen to people that have had near-death experiences, and many times they say, I can't describe it. I can't explain it. I can't, because there was nothing recognizable in their experience that their brain could recognize, that their brain could translate and allow you to communicate it. So they talk about colors that the colors I can't describe. They're completely ethereal. The feeling, the compassion, the love, the warmth, I can't describe that because it's beyond anything. And people usually just end up welling up because it's beyond the scope of what our brain is capable of translating here. Buffy, thank you very much.
Yeah, one last thing, if nobody else is asking. What about lucid dreaming, or dreaming? What's happening when you're out there lucid dreaming or dreaming or?
Yeah. So when our body is quiet and we are asleep, and sometimes, actually, I'm going to say sometimes even lucid dreams and stuff happen in our waking hours, but we're going to stick with sleeping here. What's happening is there's several things. One, our brain, we wake up and there's nothing there. We didn't have a dream. I don't remember my dreams. And that's because our brain is, instead of, when it relaxes, it just it's like the floodgates. So sometimes when you're relaxed, it just goes like that and nothing's coming in. And so you're just quiet and you wake up and there was nothing there. And sometimes you relax. So now just imagine you flop back on your back and your frequencies went whoop. And now all of a sudden we have crazy, insane dreams. I mean, we have dreams of, the person walking down the street with an octopus head, or, we have, it is just skewed and you're like, what the heck is going on? And you're thinking this is the most insane dream. I'm completely hallucinating, but yet it feels so real. And what's happening in those dreams is your frequencies are open, nice and relaxed, and your brain is desperately trying to translate whatever is happening to something that's recognizable. So we're getting like this hodgepodge of information. I mean, it's just like when you try to program a computer and say, okay, well, make me a beautiful picture based on all these pictures. And all of a sudden you have like grass with dog heads on them and the tip of the head or things like that. It's just odd. So that would be a lucid dream. And then sometimes we have no dream, and that the no dream typically works in the very same way that a general anesthetic would work, except for if you were asleep and you got hit, your nerves are still connected, so you'd feel it. But when you have a general anesthetic, it quiets absolutely everything out. But going back to I think when we were talking about when a mother loses a child, let's say for an example, or a parent loses a child, or a sibling loses a sibling, or something, and all of a sudden the person comes back and is able to come into your dream. And you typically know when that happens because it's something that isn't just a cute little lucid dream or a mini lucid dream. It's actually, you can feel them, you know that they're there, you see them, all of these things. Again, they are not in human form, number one, and that's your brain translating them back into human form, but your brain knows exactly who they are because they know the frequency, because we each have our own very special frequency. But when we're asleep, these frequencies relax and we just are. we just are. And that's how these visions, these visitations come in, because we're nice and relaxed. We're typically during the day, we're focusing on the day, as we should. And, we either miss signs, or, we're just focusing on what's happening in our life that we need to focus on. But when we're asleep, we're just nice and relaxed, and the visitation can come in a lot easier. And it's not that we're disconnected. It's not any of that. It's just that our frequencies have opened up, and we're kind of eavesdropping on a conversation between us and the departed. So for example, my son and I would be on the conscious plane and having a conversation. And then when I'm asleep, my frequencies open up, and I'm basically, this body is basically, or this brain is basically eavesdropping on the conversation that's already happening between my son and myself. So we're always connected. We're always in some sort of communication, conversation, energetically up there, which is wonderful. So thank you, Buffy. Oh, Tanya, hi.
Hi. Before my daughter passed, it was before she lost consciousness. At the end, she had a brain cancer, and she got it really fast. She was very active. And we always prayed together that she was going to run and play again, because it was devastating. She couldn't do anything she liked to do. So, yeah. The night before she had the tumor burst, because bled into itself, she came to me and she said, "Mama, I have to go." And I saw her dancing around. I was in the shower, and she was twirling around in her skirt, and just said that, But since then, I've been in other sessions with Gloria, and I think it opened up my brain, and I'm sad, but at the same time, I feel her constantly. And I feel other deceased people now that I didn't feel before. So I don't know. There's things that come to my mind that, it's something my grandmother would have told me now, or something that friend would have told me, and sometimes I don't need to meditate. It is a type of, you're going through a situation, might be really stressful, and it comes to you, or it might be even if you're relaxed in nature, So. Yeah.
And it's what you're describing is exactly what we're talking about. It's not all the time, but it ebb and flows, and it shows up when it's going to show up, and it goes when it goes. But when someone is going to depart, they typically know it. Even for some reason. I was speaking to somebody actually earlier today that their son was killed and was hit by a car and killed. And the Saturday before, so that was this Saturday, so the day before, because he died on a Sunday. They were having a conversation on what to do if one of us dies, or, and the conversation wasn't necessarily a typical conversation, but it was almost as if spiritually they knew it was going to happen, and they just kind of prepped for it. And when she got the phone call the next day, telling her that her son had passed away, in a way, it helped her through it, because they got to, do what they needed to do. But we do get signs, energetically and spiritual signs. I know that before my son passed away, and I do not talk about this scene very often. I
Sorry about
oh no, that's okay. I was going to tell you that I had taken Zicam, so zinc, and I take zinc periodically, and I had taken a zinc Zicam tablet, and I had actually taken 2 that day, and I went to my bedroom and I laid down there, and all of a sudden we talk about lucid dreaming. We talk about these lucid visions where your brain is trying to make sense of something. And this coincided with a dream that I had had when I was a child, but all of a sudden down the hallway, it was like this very strange. I couldn't wrap my head around it, so my brain was skewing it to something that I didn't like to see. And it wasn't my son, it was just this imagery. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was like something impending. I didn't quite understand what was happening. And then I was having some medical procedures the next day, and I needed to get ready for that. And I remember getting my stuff ready, and all of a sudden my son came to mind, which was not abnormal because I thought of my son all the time. And my kids and I always, I mean, we just kind of send each other, oh, I love you. And I'm sure you do that. You know, you might be thinking of somebody and you're like, oh, I love them. And they come to mind. But on this time, it was a different version of thinking of my son. It was not as strong. It was more like a whisper, and it just whispered. And it was a vision of my son. It just kind of whispered. And so I didn't think much of it. I just was like, oh, I'm distracted. I'm doing these things. And then when I got the call, I was still coming out of anesthesia when I got the call that my son had passed. I still didn't recognize the turn of events because I was focusing on other things. So I didn't necessarily recognize the lucid dream. I didn't necessarily recognize the whisper until I started processing the death. And so all of a sudden, maybe a month later, I was like, oh my gosh, how did I miss that? But there wasn't anything I could do. There wasn't anything I could do to stop it. It was just, you know, he was signaling to me that he was going to be passing away. And then after that, there was a whole bunch of after-death communication and communications from him and signs and signals and everything else under the sun that could have possibly happened with him. But so to hear that your daughter shared her twirling and dancing, what probably happened was it was a signal from beyond, from the other side of the veil, from her spirit to yours, saying, I'm okay, I'm whole. And it's not just I'm okay, it's I'm whole, I'm whole, I'm complete, and I'm beautiful, and I'm happy, and I'm full. And it was just your spirits, you know, connecting before that. I'm so glad that you got that imagery because that is really beautiful. I like hearing that. It's very good.
Thanks.
Yes. Yes. Anyone have another question? Let's see. Well, I guess I could share, since we're talking about after-death communication, now we've gone from consciousness and I just brought up after-death communication. I can share some of the things my son did. I remember at first, I think one of my favorite stories, oh gosh, even though it was like the day after, I make chocolate and I typically have a bag full of chocolates. When I meet you, I say, oh, we want some chocolate, because so much of my life has been silent. I don't, like, I'm talking to you now, but when I'm not talking to somebody, I don't utter a word. Like, I don't talk, I don't have anything on, I don't have, you know, nothing. I've been silent my whole life because the way my brain works, it doesn't work in English, and translating is very hard sometimes for me to speak in any language. So like years before, my kids were in the car and we were teasing around, like, Mom, does anybody ever offer you chocolate? I was like, I don't think so. I don't think anybody's ever just walked up to me and said, do you want some chocolate? And we were kind of laughing about that. So on the airplane to go get my son, I was very sad. I was very sad. It was obvious I was very sad. And the flight attendant walked by and she stopped and she said, is there anything I can get you? Do you want a drink of water or anything? And I just, no, I don't need anything, because you just don't need anything at that moment. And so she turned around and started walking towards the front of the plane, and I'm just kind of sitting there, just not looking at anything, but I could see her trajectory, and she just stopped. And then all of a sudden she turns around, she comes back and she says, I know this is going to sound weird. She says, but I was wondering, would you like any chocolate? I have some chocolate in my bag. And I had to think about that. And I declined the chocolate, but I was like, gosh, that was odd. And then I crested the hill after about a 3-hour drive after I got off the plane to where my son had passed. And I have my other sons with me, and we look up in the sky. It was October 29th was the day he passed. So this was Halloween by the time I got up there. And the sky was completely overcast, 100% overcast. You couldn't see anything except for it looked like a finger painting of an eye, and a frown. And we were like, oh my gosh, if I had thought, I would have taken a picture, but I really don't carry my phone that often at that time. I really just stared. But the second I crested where he departed, so he was over here and my road was right here, it was like going right through a wall. And spiritually, he gave me a message, and spiritually I responded back immediately. It was like a runner, at the end, and you go through that tape and you're like, whoo. That's kind of how quick the message was. It just kind of broke the tape. But he would do amazing things. So he would, at dinner time, go to the microwave and push buttons. So 3 was his number. So he would push the button 3 times, beep, beep, beep. And then the microwave would turn on. So I'd get up from the table, I'd go and I'd turn it off, and I'd go and sit down. And then he would do it again, beep, beep, beep. And the microwave would turn on. And then I'd go and sit down again after I turned it off, and it would do it 3 times. One time I was in a hotel, it's called the La Playa Hotel in Carmel, California. And I had just bought my house in Big Sur. And so I was going to meet a contractor the next day. So I actually flew up to Monterey from San Diego. And my car was smashed by a tree the day before. So I had to take my car in before I went to the airport. I got a rental car, and at the rental car agency, I checked in, and my son was 22 years old. He had nothing to do with my auto insurance, and I had nothing to do with his. So I'm checking into the car agency, and she said, okay, this is your address. I said, yes. And she says, okay, and this is your telephone number. And she gives me my son's former telephone number. And I was like, no, that's not my telephone number. So there's no way that she or the computer should have had that telephone number. So I get over and to pick up my car, and it's in the auto body place, and there's people dropping off their cars. And out of the blue, this man shows up. Like literally, he just shows up, tangible as you or I. And I'm in the rental car, and he knocks on the window. And I am thinking, oh my gosh, should I roll down the window? So I rolled down a crack. And I say, yes. And I'm looking through the little 2-inch crack up there. And he says, I just want you to know that your son says he's okay. And I was like, And so I've rolled my window down a little more. And I actually rolled it all the way down. And I said, what? And he puts his hand on the door. So you know how you have the door and you can put your hand on there. And he has 3 fingers. That's all he has on his hand. So he has 3 fingers. And he says, he wants you to know he's okay. And that's basically it. And then he says some other things that only I would know, because it was like verbatim the conversation that my son and I had a month before, about how life is in school and all this stuff. So 3 or 4 people in the parking lot, one woman with a stroller. And I mean, it was basically a movie scene. And they had all stopped and listened to what this man was saying. And then he turned around. Oh, at first I got out of the car and I said, may I give you a hug? And so I gave him a hug, and then he left. And as he left, people in the park were like, oh my God, it's only a car. Or, oh, I shouldn't be worrying about, going to yoga. I should be spending time with my child and things like that. So it was amazing, the domino effect, the dynamics that this situation had. So then I finally get up to Monterey and I'm in the La Playa Hotel. And that night, and if I could show you, I don't know if it would show up on the camera here, but I did film it. About 3:33 in the morning, the bathroom light turns on. And it doesn't just turn on a little bit. It turns on so brightly that the light bulb should have exploded. That's how bright. I mean, it filled up the entire room. I was like, Davy boy. And he, in a few minutes, turned the light off after about 3 minutes, I guess. And I waited and I waited. And I was like, okay, if that was you, do it again. And we had always promised each other that we would haunt each other, so that I'm getting my haunting. And I start dozing off. I'm too sleepy. And so I actually get my phone and I prop it up next to the lamp to kind of angle towards the bathroom. And all of a sudden it happens again. And sure enough, I got it on my phone, and I got it on my phone twice, because he did it a total of 3 times. And I'm going to see if we can try to experiment with it. Let's see. Oh, no, it's not working.
You have it on
Well,
computer?
I'll post it, and I can put it on my website, which is marenmuter.com. I can put it on my website there. You guys are welcome to go over there and see it there. I'll put it on the front page.
If you have it on your computer, you could share your screen and you could see it.
I don't think it's on my computer, but otherwise I would. So then the next day I wake up and I go to the front desk and I said, did you have any power surges or anything like that? Because, you always want to make sure that I like to make sure, I like to know that it was real. And they said, nope, no power surges, nothing. So I get over and I'm waiting for the contractor, and I decided I would get a cup of tea. So I went to this little tea shop, the Carmel Valley Roasting Company. And I was sitting there. There was no one else around. I just hear, Mom. And I was like, wow. Sounded like my mom, like my call. But I was like, there's probably a kid down there yelling at Mom. So I'm just sipping my tea, thinking about the lights. And I was like, oh. And then I hear it again. And I hear, Mom, don't leave me. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's David. So I get back in my car, I drive over to the hotel that I've already checked out of, and I get to the front desk. She says, Miss Muter, did you want to go up to your room? And I said, yes, I would like to go to my room. I was like, may I have a key? She says, you do not need a key. So I climb the stairs and I get up there. And as I get up there, it was palpitating energy. It was like, boom, boom, boom. I mean, that's the only way I could describe it. The door was askew. There was cleaning supplies all over the place. The mattress was off the bed. It looked like a giant tornado had gone through the room. And the cleaning lady did not want to go back in there at all. But as I stood in there, that is what I felt. It was just the biggest pulsation of energy. Absolutely incredible. And so I was like, baby boy, come with me. I'm not leaving you. You can come with me. And not that he's, stuck to that room. I think he just wanted recognition that he can come with me, that I wasn't leaving him, that I didn't just check out and not say goodbye or something. I don't know. Anyway, but his hauntings continued, everything from padlocks and unlocking padlocks to, he broke, I was like, do you like this lamp? I just remodeled the house, and he, I guess, didn't like the lamp I put in the bathroom, because the lamp literally exploded, and it was the glass exploded, and it was just LED lights. Because I was like, I wonder if these LED, this color, do I want warm or cold? And I guess he didn't like it. So, but there's a whole bunch. Yes, Gloria, hi.
Mhm. I was wondering if you ever encouraged him to go on.
Good question. No, because from what I understand, and everybody can have their own opinions and ideas on this, but when someone leaves this tangible body, this physical body, they are not stuck in limbo. They are not punished. They are already on the other side of the veil. They are already there. So you don't need to do that. And sometimes I work with people that have said that they've gone to a medium, or they've gone to someone and they said, oh, we need to do this something, a seance or whatever it is going to be, to a ritual to help the spirit pass on. So there's several things with this that are detrimental to the healing process and to the understanding of what the incredible compassion and love and understanding and the consciousness is on the other side of the veil. Number one, we in a human form do not, cannot see. So no matter what it is, no matter how much I say I see on the other side, until I leave this physical body, I will not ever be able to see the fullness of what is over there and what it means. And the other thing is that, and the way I like to explain it, is sometimes people think that they have a path that they're living here. They're born, they die, and they have certain things that they're supposed to be doing. There's certain lessons they are supposed to learn here. And all I want to know is, what is your lesson? Just if you can tell me what your lesson is, because there's no way that you would be brought down here to learn certain lessons or to be able to change your path or anything like that when you don't know what the path is, when you don't know what the lesson is. So if you say, I changed fate, well, how do you know that that wasn't already in the books anyway? Because we don't know those things. So when we pass on here, it's like being born. It's like being born. We are born. So it's like the baby is taken out. However the baby gets out, the baby is out of the body and now is here. So whether they had a cesarean section, whether they needed forceps or whatever it is, once the baby is out of the body, the baby is in this part of the world here. When we die, when this physical body dies, the spirit is already on the other side, is already detached from the physical body. So once it's detached from this physical body, it's not stuck anywhere. It's just not stuck anywhere. And it is a gift to know this. You're not getting punished. So if people have committed suicide, yeah, no. Well, there's nobody attached. So you don't need to pass them on because they're there. They're already there. They're already there, which is wonderful. And as they should be. Nature doesn't make things complicated. Nature does not, we are nature, we are natural. And so nature doesn't set out to make things complicated. And so once we're done with this body, we're done with this body. And there is no entity attached to the body. There is no entity attached earthbound because it's vibrational and it's consciousness, and it's part of the hum of existence, the hum of life. So, yeah. At least that's what my belief is, and other people have their own beliefs, and that is okay. And I'm not here to take people's beliefs away. I can only share what I see and understand for myself.
There are many different levels of consciousness and vibration and dimensions. And depending on our own consciousness, we are where we are a vibrational match, that's where we go. And if we're very attached to either a person or a situation in our lives that was unresolved, we can hang around longer than is good for us. That's my experience, and what a lot of traditions, whether it's indigenous or theosophy, spiritualism, that get their information from spirit, to teach. Oh, Tanya just came back. Anyway, it's okay.
Yeah. Well, no, that's very interesting, and I do talk about this actually quite often, because there's nothing that is unresolved here when we leave, and that's a whole other topic. And I'm actually writing a book about it. When we speak indigenously, you look at spiritual rituals and things like that. It's very similar to a funeral, and it's not for the departed, it's more for the living. And so, sending someone off and saying, okay, we need to help them cross over. It's not helping them cross over. They have crossed over. They're absolutely fine. What it's doing is it's giving yourself closure. And it's just saying, it's telling yourself that you can keep going on, because it's the human body, the energy that's in the human body that hasn't let go. It's the energy in the human body that is struggling. The spirit, the consciousness that has left the physical body behind, is absolutely fine. They're not having any trouble at all. And the different hums, the different ranges of frequency, don't bound anyone to do that. You need to look at it as more of a symphony. And so they have full range, and they have full reach into different dimensions, different frequencies, different vibrations. It's us that is limited. It is us in this physical body that is extraordinarily limited. And so if we look at ceremony from shamans, and ceremony from Native Americans, and from Aborigines, and whomever, it is the departure. They know that entity is fine. And you can, I've spoken to many Aborigines actually that still do ceremony, and Native American Indians. And it literally is, they know that spirit is okay. And if you speak to the talisman or the shaman or the medicine man, they know that the spirit is okay. And they understand also that it's the way that we let go, that we say goodbye. Now, we have to also understand that our brain can only translate information that we can understand here. And right now, in this trajectory of life, we only understand linear. We only understand a trajectory that looks like this. We've created a time frame, and this is what we've done. But there's so much more than that. So really, those situations and those ceremonies are for the living, are for the people in this vessel. But the spirits that have moved on are fine. They're not stuck. They're not stuck in translation. There's nothing, but they might be coming back. And so, sometimes people are like, oh, I keep visiting and I feel like they're hanging on and all this kind of stuff. And there's two things to this one. Number one, your spirit isn't human form. Your spirit isn't this big, and so it's everywhere. So they're not stuck here. They're not tagging on. But if you are having a very, very hard time with the loss, let's say that you're having a very hard time with the loss, which is okay, because that's what happens when we lose somebody significant, or if we lose somebody and it's shocking to us, we're processing it. We're trying to process it, to understand it, to comprehend it, to embrace it. And so the spirit on the other side might be hanging around, or a little tiny fraction of that spirit might be hanging around to try to give you comfort, to try to say, it's going to be okay, you're going to be okay, you're going to be okay, and it's going to be okay. And so sometimes we think, or mediums will talk about, people that act as spiritualists or whoever might talk about having the ceremonies to let them move on. But in reality, that ceremony is your funeral. That ceremony is for you to say goodbye and to say, okay, I can stand on my own. I can breathe. I'm going to be okay. And then to let go. And so that's traditionally where these ceremonies came from. And over the course of decades and centuries, they kind of became skewed and kind of lost in translation, like a game of telephone. But they're lovely ceremonies, but they are not needed, and nobody is stuck in any limbo, at least that I understand. But I do appreciate hearing more about what you guys believe and things like that. So I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing.
I was wondering if you'd like to share a few of the letters that you wrote when you were a little girl that you buried.
Absolutely.
That would-
Sure. I'm going to talk to Buffy quick, and then I can read some letters.
Okay, thank you. So people who pass due to assisted death drugs or overdose or accidental overdose, do you have any take on, is that a whole physical body thing and that gets left behind when they leave, or does it have an effect on the consciousness? Do you have any takes on that?
I do. Okay. So everything from suicide to drug overdose to car accident is all natural. They're all natural forms of death. And people look at me like, Maren, what are you talking about? A car is a natural thing. It's created, derived of the earth. We've just manipulated things and created a car. It's a natural cause of death. The actual cause of death is our heart stops, our lungs stop, and there's no more flow of oxygen needed to the other parts of the body. And that causes our death. Suicide is natural. So a lot of people are like, what? Suicide is natural? Suicide is extremely natural. It's in every part of nature. Plants commit suicide, animals commit suicide, and people are animals and they commit suicide. Cells commit suicide. They have what's called a suicide gene. And when a cell is not needed, the gene is triggered and the cell self-destructs. Inside our brain, we have a suicide gene. And when certain events happen, so it could be depression, it could be forms of PTSD, it could be other chemical imbalances, or different situations. What that does is it all of a sudden triggers what's called a suicide gene, and it creates almost an allergic reaction in your brain. So people have studied the brains of suicide victims, and they see that the brain has swollen, and some of the chemicals in the brain are resonating with what would happen if you went into an anaphylactic shock. So you have things like that going on in there. Once the suicide gene is triggered for, not necessarily suicide attempts, but once the suicide gene is like completely activated, there's nothing you're going to be able to do to stop that suicide. It's just like when cancer, you get to a certain point in cancer, there's nothing you're going to be able to do to stop the cancer. So either you're going to die from, I mean, our bodies are all going to die from something. And so once you hit a certain threshold, whether it's your heart disease, whether it's cancer, whether it's suicide, whether it's being smacked by a car, once something is triggered, that's it. It's done there. And it's supposed to happen. But there's nothing that's going to be carrying over to where you're being punished for the death that happened. The reason why we don't have a lot of people running around doing suicide or having suicide is because that gene isn't triggered. The goal of this body is to stay alive for as long as you can mentally. We don't want to die because most people are afraid of death. Most people are afraid of if there's nothing left. I guess, I don't know. But for the most part, we see ourselves doing everything we can to stay alive. And so that's why suicide is so hard to understand. But it's literally because of what's called the suicide gene. And you can see that, you can read it, you can read scientific writing on it. And animals do it. I had a duckling that commits suicide. Literally, it drowned itself. I had, there was also a goose, I think. My neighbor had a goose that got hurt by a raccoon, and it got a puncture in its in its neck, and it literally went out to the river. And my kids and I were standing there, and literally it did everything it could to drown itself. It put its head in the water, brought it up to bring the water down, and to drown itself. So I know this is such a morbid subject and a morbid topic, but it is a very good question, Buffy. And should an event happen where it was an accidental overdose, where it was an overdose, where it was assisted suicide, so for a very compassionate way to die, no one's getting punished for that. So
Peg has a question in chat. Can you see it?
Yep, I can see it. So can you share some of your experiences you had as a young girl and realize the connections on both sides that is quite different to most? And how did I get my messages? Are you seeing visions, auditory or sensory? I don't necessarily have any specific one form of how I'm getting messages. It was just when I was a kid, I could just explore the cosmos. I could just explore around. And I would be able to take some of the things that I was seeing and translate them into things I could understand here. Some of them, a lot of the stuff I see, I cannot translate, and it's very hard. And so that's why I ended up just being quiet, because I couldn't translate. And sometimes I would just hear English as just vibrational when people would speak. So it wasn't the easiest childhood, to say the least, to do that. I learned how to cope, just as most people learn how to cope with different differences in their body. So if someone was paralyzed, they learn how to cope, throughout that. So I actually learned how to cope. It was a coping mechanism that allowed me to be able to translate what I saw, bring it down into the body. And sometimes I would share it. Sometimes, most of the times I wouldn't, which is, let's see, I have my book around here somewhere. Okay, which is where I would end up burying the letters, because I would write instead, to the best of my ability, what I was seeing. But good question. I think I was born with this connection. I had memories. I was adopted, and I had a memory of my mother holding me, and everyone told me that did not happen at all. I basically went right from being birthed out of the room and into my adoptive parents' hands. And I was like, that is not the memory that I have. I met my biological mother, which I just absolutely love her and adore her. And I asked her that. That was probably one of the first questions that I asked her, and her eyes just kind of went when I asked it. And she said, why? I said, I was just wondering, did you hold me? And she said it was a mistake. It was the attending nurse. They had switched shifts and it was feeding time, and you were brought to me for just a very brief amount of time, like probably a few seconds, until someone realized the mistake and they're like, oh, and pulled me out of her arms. So I had my memory validated, which was wonderful because I'm glad she got to hold me. I'm going to read a couple passages. I want to see what this, I saw my mouse, but I don't see my mouse, so I can't read your message. Literally, oh, there it is.
Oh, I can read it for you. Okay, from Elsa.
Mhm.
When your loved one passes on and you receive signs from them, as you did with your son, whose choice is it? Is it the choice of the loved one that passes on, or the ability of the living to receive the signs?
That is a very good question. Most of us just pass by and we don't necessarily recognize the signs that are out there, but the signs are there all the time for all of us. And it's just learning to recognize those signs. So whether it's a bird, whether it's, the way the sun rays hits, what I like to say is if you have someone that has passed on, and let's say you're in the kitchen and you're making a salad that you've made a million times before, and all of a sudden, for some reason, you're starting to cut the cucumber and you're like, wow, Jenny. And Jenny comes to mind. That's a sign. That's them communicating with you. When you start acknowledging that, then all of a sudden, you're going to start acknowledging and seeing a lot of the other signs that are already out there. So like I said, you're in constant communication with the other side of the veil 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it's learning this intuition. It's learning to trust what's going on. And so when we start recognizing and acknowledging the signs that we're getting, so even if it's really, really small, even if it's just somebody's name or the thought of somebody that comes in, that's usually your little frequencies are opening and you're realizing that you're still connecting, you're talking or something, whatever it's happening up there with the other person. So it's not that it's out of prayer, out of saying, oh, please, please, please give me a sign. The more you pray, the more you might get a sign. It's just recognizing and learning to recognize a sign. Now, sometimes we get what's called a conscious attempt at communication, where the other person on the other side of the veil, or the other conscious being on the other side of the veil, gives you a conscious attempt at communication, meaning that there is something so blatant in front of you that you would, number one, recognize it. You would be like, oh, that is definitely something. Two, the person comes to mind and you're like, okay, that is definitely something so-and-so would do. And then three, you receive it. You recognize it. You say, okay, yes, this is from them. So sometimes they do a constant attempt, a conscious attempt at communication. And so those are three things there.
Okay, so there's one other question.
I see.
Oh, well, there's two more. For
Yeah.
lack of a better word, are our death dates predestined?
Okay. So this is a topic that I speak about, and I talk about what's called a parallel life. It is a big subject, and it's a bigger subject, but I'm going to describe it in the simplest form. I am writing a book on it. It won't be a long book, but what happens, and this is why we're not being punished. This is why we don't have to come back. This is why we don't have unfinished business here. And like I was saying earlier, as much as this sounds a little bit complicated, it's not complicated. Nature does things wholly. So WHOL, whole. E. When we see the inception or the beginning of a plant, we have filmed it, and the plant, when it begins its germination, actually sends off an energy type explosion. When we look at mice or rats in the laboratory, when we have insemination happen from the sperm or the egg, it sets off actually an explosion that looks like a firework. When the human sperm meets the human egg, it sends off a firework. It's an actual literal zinc explosion, and it explodes. So we're going to put that over here. We have exploded, and now we are a firework. Now I want you to think about the 4th of July just for a moment. And I want you to think of one of those big boomer fireworks. So it goes, and it goes up, and then all of a sudden it explodes like that. And when you see that explosion, there's several things that are happening. One, you have the eye or the center, and then you have all the millions of different trajectories of the explosive product shooting out. Simultaneously, it all starts to fade at the same time. So whether it was at the core or at the very, very, very outside, it all starts to dissipate at the same time. So you got this big giant explosion, and it pretty much all goes away, no matter if the trajectory was long, short, or in the middle. When we are created and we set off this explosion, that explosion is literally made, I mean, it's a zinc explosion, but each particle, each little tiny bit of that zinc explosion is us, is a version of us, of this exact same body. And it is playing out simultaneously. So you literally are playing out every possible scenario that this body can possibly go through. Every time you made a choice and you thought it was the very best choice and you used your agency and you made that choice, a particle, a mirroring particle, made the opposite choice, thinking that is the best possible choice. Now, when we get to the level of quantum theoretics and we think of particular memory, we think of quantum superposition, we think of quantum entanglement. One particle can be part of events at the exact same time. One particle can be in multiple places at the exact same time. And it can play out, one particle can play out those trajectories of each one of those moments. The thing is, as a human being, we only get to focus, we have tunnel vision. So we can literally only see, recognize, and observe one of these trajectories. And so while I'm on this trajectory talking to you now, I'm going to pretend I had a trajectory that went up and ate my dinner. I said, goodbye, everybody. And I went up and ate my dinner. So the one life trajectory of me that went up to eat the dinner thinks, believes, understands, and focuses on only that trajectory. This trajectory does not exist in the mind, in the brain of that one, just as my brain is only focusing on this one. So I know this is very, very big. But in the end, we died at inception. We died in utero. Maybe we were aborted. Maybe we died, the cord was caught around our neck and we died. We were a stillbirth. Maybe we died at 5 years old, 10 years old. Maybe we decided at 10 years old we were going to rob a bank. And one of us decided not to rob a bank. So those set us off in two different trajectories. The reason why this happens is because it creates harmony. It creates a whole, it creates complete understanding. And so when we die, when our firework fizzles out, just as it does on the 4th of July, simultaneously, we get what's called a whole life review. We get the review of our life. And we get to experience instantly what it felt like to be hurt and what it felt like to hurt, what it felt like to be loved, what it felt like to love. And it creates the most incredible depth of compassion, the most incredible depth of love that we cannot comprehend in these bodies. And it feeds it into this vast consciousness, which is why when we go up there, we are surrounded, we are absorbed by this complete understanding where there's no questions, there's no answers. It's just a complete harmony, complete knowing. So what happens to a child when they're aborted? Does the child feel the abortion? And what does this do spiritually to the mother? Oh, these are great questions. I want to go back to Sarah's, for lack of a better word, our death dates predestined? In a way, yes, and in a way, no. Because once we're not going to live to 200 years old. The chances of us living to 120 years old are pretty incredible. Our body is an organic vessel. And like most organic things, like all organic things, it will expire. There's nothing we can do about that. Because we're playing out all of these different trajectories, we are going to be dying at a million different waypoints. And so in that sense, then yes, we do have an expiration point. Yes, our body is going to expire. I work with people with cancer. I work with people that are getting ready to pass over and transition. I work with a lot of medical oncologists. I work with a lot of holistic practitioners around the world. And with medical facilities. I also work with biotechnologies and working in the biotechnology sector for multiple different diseases. One question that I do get is from people that have had cancer and they are in remission or their cancer is completely gone. And they ask me, what can I do to make sure this cancer doesn't come back? What can I do to make sure this cancer come back? And the simplest answer is absolutely nothing. And the reason for this is because once it is time for you to expire, once it's time for this vessel to be returned to the earth and all your molecules back to the earth to feed the up and coming living organisms, it's time to go. And there's nothing bad about this. There's nothing scary about that. And we are really doing a disservice to ourselves by saying, oh, we need to stop doing this. We need to do this. We need to do this. We need to do this in order to increase our life. But the best thing that we can do is to worry about the quality of life. The best thing we can do is, if we embrace death, if we know that we are going to die one day, then all of a sudden what we get to do is we get to embrace life. If we are fighting death, if we are looking for absolutely everything we can to hold on to life and push death away, we are not living. We are living in fear. We are in a constant state of worry. And that is the biggest disservice that we can do and to our life, rather than embrace life. So if we learn to embrace death, we learn to embrace life. It extends the quality of our life, and it extends the fullness and the richer life that we get to do here. Let's see. So I hope that kind of answered. But again, these are my experiences and these are my thoughts, and I'm not here to force them upon you. And I really do appreciate and embrace, other points of view on these subjects, because in reality, in the end, we have to believe and do what resonates with us, because that is going to help us create this quality of life that we are looking at. I'm going to read Peg's answer, and then I'm going to get to Julie, and then Gloria, and then Tom.
I didn't know.
Okay.
And I don't know how that happened.
Okay, so then I'll go Julie, and then Tanya. Okay, what happens when a child is aborted? Does the child feel the abortion? What does this do to the mother spiritually? Abortion is a tough, tricky subject, and if you have had abortion or if you need an abortion, it is not something to take lightly. The child feels the abortion more like a vacuum. So it really depends on what stage, what trimester, a full-term abortion, the child's going to feel it. In the first 3 months, it will feel more like a vacuuming. It will feel more like if you were to suck in a straw, there's not going to be pain there, but they will know it's happening. Like I said, at that point in development, your brain isn't fully developed. You have free flow consciousness. So it's really just more of a vacuuming feeling, and just, letting that baby go. Full-term abortion, the baby is definitely going to feel it, because you have fully intact nervous system, your brain is ready, and so everything is working, and they're going to feel it. Unless the doctor will go in and put some sort of euthanization in there, and then the baby will just go to sleep and then not feel it. So, and hopefully that's how these abortions are done, if they're done. And I believe they do that in some places. Spiritually, what this does to the mother, it really depends on, again, what stage the person is in, what mind frame they are in at that time. It can change. It can have zero effect at that time. It's not necessarily spiritually that this is going to affect the mother. It is going to be more psychological, which is earthbound, which is in your brain, is going to be potentially psychologically devastating. It might not be at the very onset. It might be before you have someone go in for an abortion, but it is psychologically based, because it definitely does change the brain chemistry in the mother at that time, because your body is doing, you think about a woman that has had a miscarriage. It's hard to have a miscarriage, because you're looking forward to it and you're already attached to this little baby at the teeny tiny stage. But you heal over that, because you can understand that that's your body, and your body rejected the baby, for some reason. When you go in and actually have the baby physically removed, psychologically, that's damaging. So it's not spiritually damaging, it's psychologically damaging. Because naturally, when we look at nature, our goal, once we are impregnated, is to do everything we can to keep that baby alive. That's why it's in our womb. Because that's the safest place for this little teeny tiny developing fetus. The safest place is in the mother's womb. And by going in there and having it removed, that goes against everything biologically that is supposed to be happening. And I totally understand there are some situations that are absolutely devastating, and and it has to be done. So according to that mother. So that was a very good question. And thank you very much for asking that, Peg. I really appreciate that. Julie. Hi.
Hi, I'm unmuted. Yay. First of all, I do have one question, but it goes way back, like 4 topics. But before I get to my question, I want to say I love everybody's questions, and I love how you answer them, Maren. I'm learning so much from you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
And yes, some of it is hard to wrap around. Some of it's like time travel. Like, wait a minute, what year am I in? Like some of it's like, and some of it makes so much sense. But my question goes back to I think Gloria or somebody said when a spirit is speaking with us through the veil, is it intentional? Which party is it intentional? Something about that being intentional. And as you were giving the answer, I was thinking, doesn't this happen with people still on the earth? Like I can think of a friend and then the next day they actually call me, or I can, finish someone's sentence, or I don't know. There's just times, yeah, I do. I think I'm not living with my kids because they're not in the same state as me, but I'll think of my kids all the time. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're thinking of me, but maybe they are. I don't know. But isn't there still that communication happening even with those that are still on this planet?
Good question, and thank you for asking it. The answer is yes, because when we go back to the beginning of our talk today, the majority of our consciousness, 99.9% of our consciousness, is out here, and our brain is just filtering it for information here. So we are all connected. We're all in communication. So we can have these same connections, which is, let's see, who said it? We were talking about the daughter that came and did the ballet dance and twirl around before she passed away. And that's a perfect example that we are connected right now in 2 living bodies on the other side, just as we are connected once they have passed on. So that's a very good question, Julie. Thank you very much for asking it. Tanya, hello.
Thank you for everything you say. I just wanted to share, you talked about when you went up. I didn't hear it from the beginning. I just realized, oh, I'm missing it. So I was somewhere. So that's how I was driving. But after she passed, I was walking, not hiking, walking in the neighborhood. And she passed in winter. And the clouds were up. And there was an eye in the clouds open up. It's like a crying eye, that's how it looked, it was just after. And we went camping. My husband thought, okay, if it was her birthday, we always celebrate her birthday. And it's been 2.5, it hasn't been that long, but I don't know. I just, before knowing Gloria, I had a lot of spiritual philosophy and thought, and I prayed a lot during her passing that she would go peacefully, but anyways, we have some signs like after my husband said, oh, if a moose shows up on her birthday, and a mother moose showed up in the morning with the baby moose, and we don't see them that often, you might think, oh, it's a coincidence, but as I think these are signs, this year we went camping. It was close to her birthday, but we saw we drove around. My husband likes to go off campings. We go off, national lands, and the site we went at, and we just had pulled in, and I saw blue lace, which we used for her celebration of life on the floor. And on the tree, there was a J and a number, a J plus love and a number. So 14, I don't know. She turned 13 here on Earth this year. And maybe she's telling us that we should come back next year for the celebration. But it doesn't matter. A month after she passed, I'm from Brazil, so I went to visit my family. And I was walking around we went out to walk, and there had been a party the night before, like a typical party. And on the floor, on the ground, there was a paper which said her name. And love, it had David after it, but the message was her name, Juliana, So it just different things. This year, my mother-in-law passed, and she was a very wise person. She passed at 96, and obviously the passing of her granddaughter was really hard on her too. She was in Brazil too, but she came to me in a dream where her and my father-in-law, who passed before, they were taking care of Juliana, and I came in and she just told me, oh, she didn't want to eat. And then I was showing them the scar from one of the surgeries she had, and she hugged, and I said, and something went on, and she hugged me, and I just said, we'll be together again. We're coming back. So I just think she came to say goodbye, because she passed she passed while we were here and we weren't with her. So, and probably my daughter is with her. So I'm just giving experiences, and they became stronger after the passing of my daughter, because you feel so connected. You want to be connected, so.
Yeah. Oh, those are great stories. And I would take every single one of those as a sign completely. The name on the paper, absolutely everything. Like, it just resonates. So if it resonates with you, when you see those things, that is the sign. I mean, that it's a beautiful example. Thank you, Tanya, for sharing that, because those are perfect examples of how signs show up, where we might disregard them or we might recognize them. And the more we recognize them, the more we're going to pick up and see out there, because we're always still connected. Thank you. All right, here we go. We're going to read some stuff here quick.
Okay, Maren.
Yes.
I'm afraid we're out of time.
Okay. All right. That's okay.
Read one real quick. Do you want to read one real quick?
Yes, let me see if I can find it. I will. Let's see, waves blowing up. There's one that I would love to end on, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to find it. Okay, let's see if I can find one really quickly. Well, this is a nice one to end on. It's just very, 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 very simple. And I wrote to the flower lady, and that's a story on its own. But this one says, "Dear flower lady."
How old were you when you wrote this?
Let's see what year. So I probably going to be about 6. Okay. This is, I had written about biotechnologies. I actually spoke about some of the biotechnologies that are actually coming out only today, and I actually wrote about them. And the first biotechnology experiments were actually done in 1989, and the first time I wrote about them were in 1978. So, but this one is just very, very simple. This one says, "Dear flower lady, the moonless night is brilliant with stars. Please let me slip into their mysteries. Let me dance with the fairy tale of eternity." So I do like that one. Let's see if I can find. Give me 2 seconds. Thank you for being. Oh, shoot. 53. Oh, there's one. Oh, well. I'll just, let's see. Some of them are like whole conversations. So here's one. It says, this talks about connection anyway. So it says, "Dear flower lady, I think the trees communicate with each other. The whispering of the trees, I don't think means just the wind in the branches. I think they actually have a consciousness. I remember digging around in the garden beneath the bushes and trees when I was looking for a place to mail my letters. And the roots were more like a netting. I don't know why this came to me today, but there was a lot of stuff going on down there. It was almost like I exposed some of their secrets. I remember feeling as though they were talking to each other and to me. I touched them softly and apologized for disrupting them. I didn't bury anything there, but I did go back to say hello often. Love, Maren." And I was probably 5 at that.
Beautiful. And, you know, you can read more of the letters in her book. And we have it on our website or Amazon, we have the Amazon links. So if you want to purchase the book there, you can, or you can purchase it on Maren's website. You have them for sale on your website.
That's
So,
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Thank you so much, Maren, for spending time with us and generously sharing all your truth.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure. And if any of you have any other questions, on Sunday, I'm having a fireside chat and you're welcome to join. There's no fee there. You just come over to my website, marenmuter.com, and you're welcome to join us in conversation. And if you come up with questions between now and then, you're definitely ready, available to ask them at that time.
Great.
So thank you very much, everyone. It was very nice meeting you.
Thank you.